Hello there! Welcome back to Charles Circle, and welcome back to Captain of Industry. Last time, we built our second bridge to expand onto our third island. Today, we'll establish a mining outpost there to solidify our expansion, and along the way, we're going to dip our toes into Electronics 2 production to prepare for that massive factory that we're planning on our second island. And speaking of which, the votes for island number 2's name are tallied, and G.I.J.S. Kramer's Silicon Ridge wins. Lots of suggestions around silicon, and among them, Silicon Ridge polled best. Makes sense given our grand plan for advanced electronics production here, and plus there's some fun symmetry to Silicon Valley in real life. We've got lots to do today though, so without further ado, let's get into today's to-dos. Number 1, we can't, or at least shouldn't, build a mega factory without first introducing the concept at a more manageable scale, so we're going to build a small, minimum viable product version of Electronics 2 as an extension of our Copper and Electronics 1 factory. This is largely just to introduce the concept, but we'll make good use of the parts we produce. This will require new production for us, silicon, so we'll pick that up along the way, and just to queue up those technologies, or show you that I already have, right? We're finishing the Mixer 2 upgrade that we got already. Arc Furnace 1 will be required as a prerequisite in order to produce silicon. So we'll run through this set of technologies first, and then I think we're going to grab Trains 2, because, I don't know, we're going to set up a few larger trains today. Maybe we'll be able to take advantage of it. Because the B story today is taking further control of our new island from last time. It's looking to me like that island best serves us as a grand mining outpost that'll supply our manufacturing via rail. So we're going to start sketching out an export station and begin sending materials back to our main island, I think beginning with oil. Our refinery works just fine using our world map supply, but it's more manpower and unity efficient to use on-map supplies where convenient, so this seems like a good one to set up. And in case you're wondering why we didn't apply that logic to our other oil patch out this way that we finally cut through to last episode, I've already got that earmarked for something else. More on that later in the episode. We are also, just as we did last time with our concrete factory, going to need to do a little bit of relocation in our farming area to clear out space for our emerging transport arterial. Because, as we saw last time, the bridge cuts directly through here, and by the way, is already lined up with our sort of starting roadway. And as a result, we'll probably send rail on the other side of that tile, and that cuts directly through our current initial starting farmland, right? So we're going to need to do a little bit of eminent domaining in this area. It's not going to be a full-on revamp of the entire setup like it was with concrete, as I haven't really decided what our long-term plan with farming is going to be yet. I'm increasingly aware that our current setup is a bit hodgepodge, functional and honestly not awful for something we've built in layers over time. There's this concept called sedimented rationality, which at its core just describes that our systems, like technological, societal, organizational, are all stacked on top of each other in new layers when new technologies or needs emerge. So like each new idea has to be incorporated into the pre-existing surface that was there already. So even though each new implementation is done rationally in the moment, in sum total, they're never really how you'd rationally design this system from scratch. And we've got that in droves here, don't we? Anyway, I digress. We'll need to move our first farm here down to the end of the row and probably relocate the ethanol production that we set up recently, maybe just across the street here downstream of our corn. Let's see. But once we've done that, we will be able to pass all of the trains that we'd like to build this episode through into our manufacturing area from the left side of our main base. Beyond all that though, we have, as always, some odds and ends, mostly monitoring long-term projects around exploration and terraforming. So let's start there, actually. We'll get the ship back in motion. Let's say go grab, I don't know, let's fight some battles first, clear out the edges of the map, and then I do want to make sure that we get some cargo ships during this episode, because I think we might finally start to set up our first contracts soon. In addition to that, right, we need to make sure that we continue to spin up more terraforming crews, because we've still got quite a bit of work on the site prep side of things for our future mega factory, and I think there's more work we need to do on our main island terraforming wise as well. So I'm going to queue up, let's just say, we've got the vehicle cap. How about 5 more excavators? And that'll mean we need some more trucks, but we seem to have quite a bit of idle trucks right now. I'm going to start with the excavators and add supporting trucks as necessary. If our base is able to keep up with the trucks we already have, even better, right? All right, so let's start there and get into the farm relocation. All right, a little bit left to do, but that's most of it done. Couple quick thoughts. One, I used some of the space that we took back from this farm here to keep the fermentation tank nice and tidy and right next to the pre-existing mill. I had been flirting with the idea of using a overflow corn only type of build that ran out this direction, but it ruined the crisp aesthetic of the storefront here, and I realized, well, we could just kind of use this corner here. It doesn't intersect with the road. Why not? The other thing I realized was we actually didn't need a dedicated air separator for that production. We have another one over here with the spare capacity that's currently only feeding the single building of this chemical plant and the occasional use of oxygen here. So that saved us on a building and the maintenance and workers that go with that, although not with the electricity. It's still going to run the collective same amount because we need the same collective amount of oxygen as we did before. Still though, smaller footprint, less maintenance, fewer workers, good stuff. So that should continue to be as productive for us as it was before. And yeah, we also have our first pair of large ramps. So these are of the 3 that you can use. This is the one we normally use. This is the next one. It has 2 slots underneath, 1, 2. And the largest one has 3 slots. The one in the center can actually go up over 2 levels of belter pipe. And, you know, we could just play around with the belts in order to, or pipes in order to run them underneath, but I figured, you know what, it's already there. I like the aesthetic of our unbroken belts all the way through, so we're gonna leave it. Of course, we are gonna have to interrupt that here and here when we continue to bring the rails through. So it is what it is. We can't quite avoid it entirely, but I will take it, I guess, where we can. I think what we need to do at this point is just get these rails built. Need a crossing here so that we can get to this other side without having to go all the way around. But I think that's the only crossing we'll need in this area. We also pulled back, as you can see, the water main that was coming through here, kept that a little bit tighter. It still intersects and meets up here, allowing us to prioritize between the 2 reservoirs. And yeah, I think that's good enough for now. We're going to keep bringing the rails through as things evolve, but going to give our trucks and base a chance to catch up here for a moment while we check on some other things. The first of which is, well, we've completed Mixer 2 research. We really got that primarily for these 2 mixers, which have intermittently needed boosted in order to keep up on our total fertilizer 2 consumption. So let's go ahead and implement that while we're in the area. And then let's also see, we have a new area. Okay, pretty nondescript, but we got some loot for it. And our ship is back, and I believe already repaired, presumably? I think so. So let's get it back out and grab another battle. Keep cleaning these up. All right, well, while that's in motion, I think I will let our base catch up for a moment, see if we can't keep researching, and come back to you when it's time to either do the next chunk of rails here. Probably going to involve, as I mentioned, relocating or, giving some clearance for these pipes and belts, and this one. And then, of course, we need to move this rogue fuel station who's been in the way for a minute. I have to decide where I'm going to put it first. That's the only reason I haven't already. But we'll keep this parallel set of tracks, right? And this is, we're properly actually finally doing bidirectional separate tracks because this is going to be an infrastructure spine for us for the rest of the game compared to our single direction loop that we've done out here. But we'll keep bringing that out this way. And as I mentioned, I think we're going to want to set up a station where we can drop off some iron ore for our steel plant. We already previewed that I think this will be some station drop-off as well for excess rock and slag. And I'm not sure what else in this area will get a dedicated station just yet, but it does eventually also need to pass all the way through here and connect up with what will eventually be a similar set of rails coming out of this bridge to go out this way. So that's what we're building towards. Slowly but surely, rail continues to be a significant investment, so we're going to do it stepwise, but that's the long-term plan that we are going to try to execute against. So I'll be back in a moment when it's time for the next step. Hey, we won a battle, we got some loot, and we found canola seeds, another crop that we can eventually use for cooking oil and such. And more importantly, we found, using our radar, that one tile away out here, is a new settlement, and I'm very excited about that. So let's get out there in a moment, see what contracts and trades we get for it. Okay, awesome. So the new settlement unlocks a few new quick trade options, the ability to take loans of a few more different types of materials, and another stockpile of pops we can adopt from once we upgrade our reputation. But most importantly, it also unlocks a new set of contracts. But the 3 most interesting ones to me of these 6 are the ones where we can trade slag. You might wonder, okay, but you get back trash, sour water, or sludge. It's just exchanging one waste material for another, and honestly, slag is easier to dispose of. And that's not wrong. Trash needs to go through an incinerator, and sour water needs to be stripped, and our sludge, of course, has to go through an anaerobic digester. But in each of those processes, you get back some valuable byproducts. So trash, you can get steam for, right? If you run it through the incinerator, you could use that for power, desalination, etc. Sour water is a source of both sulfur and ammonia, right? and sludge you can turn primarily into fuel gas, as well as a little bit of compost. Now, we're currently using slag to expand our landmass, and before Update 4, that was pretty critical. You couldn't reach other islands like this without building a land bridge and making them continuous so you could drive over them, and expanding the surface area of your main island was important in of itself because you needed more space to build in, right? But now that we have bridges and amphibious vehicles, there's plenty of space on this map, and we don't have to build our way there via a land bridge. So, to me, I don't think that we need to worry about dumping as a sort of a resource, so to speak. So I'm personally much more inclined to make use of a contract like this. And, you know, these things had their purposes before. I think particularly the slag for sour water one is really critical in certain situations. But I think I'm going to start doing this sort of thing, I think almost by default at this point. So similarly, right, not just slag, but the other two things that we dump, rock and dirt, there are contracts for rock for fuel gas and dirt for fuel gas, right? So what I'm actually imagining is like a little export area, maybe around here as we sort of finish polishing off the terraforming. And what we would have is a trio of cargo docks exporting our excess rock and dirt for fuel gas and our excess slag for sludge. As I said, sour water can be more valuable, but we've got sulfur and ammonia both in excess right now, and we're having to burn the extra sulfur and turn the extra ammonia into hydrogen. So if we send our slag out for sludge and then turn that into more fuel gas, we mix that fuel gas with the rock and dirt contract fuel gas, and then we run all that fuel gas through hydrogen reformers to make hydrogen to pay for the cargo ship fuel. You can run cargo ships on hydrogen and get back in excess of that some hydrogen for use around the base. Now, it won't be enough to switch all the way over to hydrogen vehicles or anything, but if nothing else, we could burn it for some spare power with zero pollution. Now, of course, to do any of that, we need another cargo ship and a bit more space in this area, so for now, let's start collecting cargo ships. How about that one to start? And keep dumping dirt here to polish off this new waterfront area. I think we can get a cargo ship set up here in short order, but we'll need to keep working in this area in the longer run to turn it into what I'm sort of envisioning in this space, including more terraforming. Speaking of which, I think we have a couple extra excavators at this point. I'm actually going to prioritize this excavation. I'm still a little worried about how much easily accessible iron we have available, so I just want to get this one wrapped up so it's not hanging over my head. Great, now we have 8, that should be plenty. And that means we need 16 trucks. We're really going to cruise through this. Very good. All right, well, for now then, we will go back to biding our time. It's a quick update. We have finished the rails in this area, building back up a bit of a stockpile while we finish up the road stuff, and I'm just sort of thinking through still how exactly to do some of this stuff. We'll jump in and do it all at once in just a moment. One cargo ship down. Let's queue up immediately another one. How about this one? And as we send off the ship to get the next cargo ship, I think I should call out, we are starting to accumulate enough electronics 2 and 3 as loot from the world map that I'm gonna start storing them outside here so that we can actually still interact with the shipyard. This, in my experience, this stockpile will get annoyingly large before we can actually spend it. It's very odd, especially to have a bunch of electronics 3 at this stage of the game, but hey, it's free stuff. Hard to say no, so we'll just add a little bit of storage right here. 2 cargo ships down, 1 more we can still grab, so let's set that in motion as well, send our ship home. The last thing we'll need to do, by the way, in addition to having cargo ships, although we actually don't need all 3 right away, is we need to donate. Our reputation at this settlement needs to increase before we have access to the contracts themselves. If you see some of these are grayed out, it's either research locked or reputation locked. So here we need to get up to reputation 3, which is not small to get the sour water one. Our sludge one, similarly also reputation 3. So we'll have to get that going too. And there we go. I think there it is. Our donation is complete. We are officially at reputation 3. So that should unlock this contract for us. Let's talk about the mechanics of a contract. So it operates, as you've probably been able to tell, through a cargo ship. in order to maintain this contract, we're going to spend Unity 3 different ways. So the first is, in the moment that we sign up for the contract, one time, it will cost us 24 Unity, as you can see, to initiate the contract. Then, to maintain it, it will cost us 0.4 Unity per minute, period, no matter what, no matter how often we use it. And then finally, per ship delivery, it will cost us 1.6 Unity. So these are manageable costs, but they do add up. If you do a ton of contracts over the course of a playthrough, they do accumulate and end up being certainly a cost in Unity. So something to keep in mind, but as we said, very manageable right now. So this cargo dock, just as we did over here, will require some modules specific to the things that we are going to be storing in them. And the good news about the slag and sludge contract is that both of these are loose modules, so we'll simply have 4 of them here. And the other thing we need to think about is how to set up our storages to drop off and pick up. So the way that this works, and it's not always incredibly intuitive, is that we have 4 slots in the ship. Each slot can only be dedicated to one product or the other, and so the ratio is never going to be perfect. What this will actually look like here is each of these loose modules has a capacity of 800. So we're going to have one of them, one slot, cover the 800 sludge that we will get back once we load up 2,000 rather, slag into the other 3 slots. The other 3 slots have a capacity of 2,400, 3 times 800. So we're not going to be able to send every last scrap of slag, or rather when we come back, we'll send 2,400 slag and get back 800 sludge and the 400 slag that we didn't actually get to spend, right? The point is 3 slag, 1 sludge, because of the ratio of the contract. It's always going to be a little bit different based on which contract it is, but we will assign a contract after we sign up for it. There we go. And we'll say assign contract, and then here, of the 2, we pick, this is our sludge one. Although actually, now that I think about it, I think I prefer that this be our sludge one, because we're going to send the sludge immediately in to get digested. So we'll make this a slag one, rather. Take those settings, apply them also to these other ones here. Now, what we want to do is make sure that this is a sort of an accept but not demand storage, so to speak. If we have other uses for slag, concrete, for example, we would prefer to use those. But if we have slag that we are otherwise going to dump, basically, we would rather accept slag here. So we won't pull, we'll simply allow it to come here. And when we say, for example, in the glass factory or any of these other factories, if we push the slag out of here, it should go here, even though we don't demand it. It would go first and foremost here because we try to pull it in. If this is full, when this is full, it will then try to fill this storage. And if this storage is full, it will then proceed along to dump. So that's the global priority for slag disposal right now. So we'll connect these up. I do want to make sure that these get filled. And in fact, maybe this is even a good moment to use a force even outputs balancer. You don't have to do this, but this is a moment where it can be helpful, I suppose. So we want these to be roughly evenly distributed, essentially, across these 3 storages. You want to, I suppose, avoid the situation where you have these 2 full, but this one not, and so it won't add up. But, you know, if these back up, it would overflow anyway. But this is a spot to use that, I suppose, so we might as well. Something like this. And then on the output side, of course, we're going to want some storage, I suppose. I mean, really, this is its own storage, right? 800 is more than we're going to get in a loose storage here anyway. Slag just operates at really high volumes, so I think it's worth having a storage here specifically. But since this is all going to be output and then immediately digested, I actually don't think we need this here necessarily. How many digesters do we need, though? That is an interesting question. The short answer is, well, I don't know, we'll just keep adding them until we, have enough to absorb them. That's the we'll just empirically figure it out answer. But we can also sort of do some napkin math if we like. So how much slag are we essentially producing right now is a good ballparking question. We can go to our stats and we can say, well, it of course varies wildly based on how much our industry is doing, but overall it looks like, roughly 100 is a fair assumption to make. And we say it's roughly 3 to 1, so maybe we're going to be getting back, call it 25, 30, something like that. So I'd say maybe 2 to start. And it might even be overkill because we consume some of that slag already, right? But, why don't we just give it a shot, give it a whirl. And this isn't super future-proof in the sense that we'll probably eventually want to increase this, the size of this cargo dock. We can get a twice as long one eventually. But I think we're going to end up relocating this once we have all of this area finished up so it's nice and tidy anyway. So I prefer let's just go ahead and keep this all close here for now. That will also allow us to build our next dock for, say, rock export sooner rather than having to wait until it's further out. So I'll jump in and do some belt work here. We'll get ourselves a fuel gas storage, I guess, and run that through a hydrogen reformer. I'll have to figure out how we're going to get steam there. I suppose we can just run some of the fuel gas into a local boiler, etc. And then the hydrogen will come out here, and any excess we'll want to make sure we can send out to the rest of the base. So I'll dive in, take care of the belt work, see you in a moment. All right, I think this works. I ended up adding a third one just because we basically had exactly the right amount of room to do so. I don't know that we're going to build them all right away, but we've got our anaerobic digesters here, and our output compost, of course, is sent out to be turned into organic fertilizer. The fuel gas enters this balancer here. We want to make sure first and foremost that our boiler has supply, so let's prioritize that. And then any excess beyond that will come out here to be turned into hydrogen. Similarly, I think we probably only build one of these right away. The last thing to note on the gas boiler is we are going to manually supply this water for now. Let's see. But consider how much steam we actually need, right? The pair of hydrogen reformers, which again, we're definitely not going to build both right away, or at least we don't need to, would take a total of 4 steam, which means a total of 4 water, right? Because water and steam, always 1 to 1 in a boiler. So I think that'll be fine. We've done that before. We'll probably do it again. very nearly missed a belt segment, didn't I? Anyway, I think the other thing to actually show, I talked about using a strictly even outputs balancer here, and then I didn't actually check the option, so that's sorted as well. And our hydrogen output is going to come out this way and go back to refuel for now. I think, I mean, to start, we're going to need to bring hydrogen in, but ultimately, I believe this is going to be a hydrogen net positive loop. So we'll probably end up eventually actually doing the opposite here, and at least, well, certainly allowing export or not requiring it to be filled up constantly, but I think we might have to push some of it out as well, but we'll adjust. We'll figure it out as it goes along. So let's go ahead and build, as I said, most of this, but not all of this. We will, of course, need all of the infrastructure stuff, so the storages and the various belts and pipes connecting them all, as well as, of course, the balancers. We will only, as I mentioned, do one of the reformers. I think let's even just start with one of the digesters as well. So we'll make sure that everything's connected there. And then on this side, of course, we need to unpause all of these outputs, including also the entire gas boiler loop and the CO2 smokestack, rather. That also requires this loop and this one and this one. There we go. I think that's everything we need. Let's find out, but we'll let our trucks get to it and come back to you when it's fully functional. Other good news, very nearly done with Electronics 2 research, so as soon as we have this up and running, we can go talk about that. Initial construction complete, and here comes the cargo ship. So we'll immediately switch it over from its default fuel of diesel into hydrogen. Let's do that now. Switch it here and then press the reset button, which will require it to bounce back out and back, but that's all right. And hopefully we should start receiving some slag in this area and stop dumping it. The other thing we should do, right, is to remove slag from the global dumping designation as well, and that should help us keep from accidentally throwing it into the sea now. All right, I'm bored of waiting, but I still want to show this off before we dive into Electronics 2, so temporarily we are going to push all of the slag out of here, and the only place it should be able to go is over here. So in just a moment, we'll be able to show off how this actually works. And there we go. Full storages here. 2400 goes out. We should get 800 back, and probably still some 400 leftover slag. Let's see what comes back. And a little while later, here we are, and we come back with, as predicted, 800 sludge and the 400 remaining slag. Very good. So as our sludge comes out here, we'll start to digest it. There's going to be obviously quite a stockpile here, but we're not generating nearly that much slag on a continuous basis, so I think we're going to be okay with just the one for now. If we end up with enough slag for another run and this ends up backed up, then we start building more of these, but I think this should do for now. All right, so let's talk about Electronics 2, starting with the end recipe and working our way back. Biggest component by volume, basic electronics. No surprise here. It's Captain of Industry, the Tier 2 anything takes the Tier 1 as an input. We also have to staple on some PCB and some silicon poly. Those two are new to us. So let's move our way upstream. PCB requires copper, glass, and plastic. More familiar with all of those. It's just an assembly step. We'll make sure that we have to, of course, supply those three inputs, but that's pretty straightforward. We can work with that. Silicon poly in the silicon reactor, new building for us, right? Takes molten silicon and some hydrogen as fuel and makes a pretty decent amount of silicon poly. This is, for example, this 12 is enough to handle 4 assembly 3s, making Electronics 2. And the molten silicon, this 12, comes from an arc furnace, and in fact it makes 24. So this arc furnace is capable of handling 8 assembly 3s worth of Electronics 2. So fortunately this is not a super high volume thing. Let's talk about arc furnaces, because this is a new building to us, but it seems kind of familiar, doesn't it? And in fact, if you start to look at a lot of these recipes, they definitely look familiar. These look a lot like blast furnaces. However, instead of taking coal, they take this graphite as a fuel. They also take just an absolute ton of power, 4 megawatts to run this damn thing. Again, that is approximately 1/3 of the entire demand of our base to run this guy. Okay. The primary input, the ore, so to speak, in this furnace is sand. The other thing to point out, looking at these recipes, these are smaller volumes. These look like the volumes of a blast furnace 1, not a blast furnace 2. So while this comes later in the tech tree, I would argue it's not really an upgrade. It's at best a side grade, but it's in many ways, I think, a step back as well. The throughput is half what a blast furnace 2 is, and you still have to do the crushed component, although you get the efficiency that goes along with the crushed component. You pollute a little bit less, which is nice. The exhaust is much less. That is, I think, for a lot of people, the headliner of why you make this transition. But again, ton of power to do this, an absolute ton of power. And you'll notice, or at least I certainly notice every time, there's no boost button here. You can't boost this. So just again for comparison, single blast furnace 2, twice the throughput, no power, takes coal, makes more exhaust. But ultimately, this is the much better throughput workhorse of our base, certainly for now, and especially considering that we can boost this on demand, and in fact we definitely do. However, you can't make this in any other building. So the arc furnace is going to exist in our base explicitly just for making molten silicon, but the arc furnace 2, a further upgrade, when we get there, does finally match the throughput of a blast furnace 2, but you have to run some water through it and do a recycling loop, and you still can't boost it, and it still takes just a ton of power. So if you couldn't tell, I'm not a huge fan of these things. I think that the other reason that people tend to use them is the graphite, though. So let's talk about graphite. Right now we only have one recipe for it. We have to take some coal, we have to take some chlorine, we mix them together and we make this graphite, and we make a little bit of sour water, interestingly. But the vast majority of the graphite that we will make in the longer run, and that I would imagine is made by players everywhere in Captain Ministry, is from CO2. It's captured and then turned into graphite, and it's quite a compressive production, right? This is the last step, really, in making our exhaust scrubbers take our air pollution to 0. So this was a huge drop for us. This 480 exhaust becoming 192 carbon dioxide decimates the amount of air pollution that we are currently making, but it doesn't completely remove it. The last step required is to take the carbon dioxide and turn it into graphite. And you can only make as much graphite as you can either store or consume. And so people tend to migrate towards these over the course of the game because you can consume this, creating less exhaust in the first place, but actually absorbing exhaust in an indirect way, becoming sort of a sink for it. In doing so, for example, if you replace some of your blast furnaces, you generate less pollution. You find sort of a balance between the two. I personally still very much prefer blast furnace 2s and will pollute in order to keep them around, but not everyone does, and you should, of course, play the game in the way that is most fun to you. But that's the overview of how they work and how the composition of your smelters essentially will change over the course of a playthrough as the technology unlocks. So plastic, as we know, we have been making in a distributed way. And by have been making, I mean the one other time we made it over here because it is also an expansive production. We can make it from either naphtha or ethanol and chlorine, and we make a pretty good chunk of plastic. we actually don't need a ton of it out here. 6 to make 12 PCBs, although you need twice as many assemblies on PCB as you do on electronics. Or excuse me, the other way around. One of these can support 2 of these, rather. It's a 1-to-2 ratio, not a 2-to-1 ratio. So we'll have to make some of this as part of our little manufacturing here. And for now, we don't have the CO2 sinking into graphite technology yet. We have to make this the old-fashioned way, and we'll have to dispose of that sour water. All right, so that's the theory. How are we going to actually do this? Well, the biggest components by volume are electronics, and the things that we need to make the other 2, copper being one of them, and a ton of sand, some coal, and even some more coal are all also here, right? As is slag disposal and exhaust venting. So we're going to make a little extension module here. This is not intended to supply all of the electronics too that we're going to need, and I'm not even going to build this, to take full advantage of the full throughput of the arc furnace. This is for us to just explore what the shape of the production looks like, and, I think importantly, to unlock the ability to go into construction parts 4. This requires us to make 20. It doesn't matter how many we find on the map, we have to actually produce 20 of our own in order to progress any further on the tech tree. So, I'm going to create, just as we did back in the day, just a little tack-on module here. This was originally a copper factory, and then we said, well, we could just make our electronics 1 here as well. So now we're just going to make a small amount of electronics 2 here as well. So we'll probably slap our arc furnace over here, take advantage of the sand and the coal. We will have to make sure that we have a chemical plant nearby. This doesn't have to be done nearby, but we might as well because the chlorine is going to be required, and, well, we're going to need that to make the plastic. So we'll do that. And I think we'll probably take the exact same set of modules where we can balance between the 2, prioritize naphtha when it's available, but use ethanol when necessary, as we did over for medical supplies. We'll have to import glass. We can redirect some copper, or at least set up a balancer that either prioritizes electronics 1 or just kind of run it around. We'll figure it out. And we'll have to set up this whole silicon production with a little bit of hydrogen brought in from elsewhere. So I'm just gonna, same as we did here, hop in, sketch something out in a time lapse, and it's not a pre-prepared blueprint, but I will offer as a blueprint in case it is helpful as a reference. You can see what we've done here. Longer run, much bigger production over here that will actually supply everything we need for the base. And I did mention earlier that I had an earmark for this oil patch. It is not to provide naphtha over here, but I believe in the longer run, we are going to create a naphtha optimized refinery as part of our electronics 2 factory. Because we're going to go through plastic in enough volume, I think, to justify that. Longer run, I thought it'd be kind of cool to use this island, which has a ton of oil on it, just in a tiny footprint in the middle of nowhere. Somehow get that over here and use that to supply this factory, at least for as long as it lasts. But that's going to be its own setup to get there. So I figured in the shorter term, why not just run this across the bridge and fuel it that way. So we're going to save this for that, even though it's on this island, and bring in that over here, even though it's on the other island. But I think it all evens out. Anyways, I'm going to hop in here and take care of the electronics 2 module. See you in a moment. All right, so I think this works. Let's walk through it real quick. I'll start on the left and work our way to the right. So the arc furnace is in the exact same rows as the blast furnace 2s. Of course, it takes the same sand and coal on the second and third layers here. And it also takes the graphite that we're making here, because this also takes coal, and we can run a pipe for the chlorine, which is originally brought over for the plastic, but of course is the same source. Might as well. Not that bad to run a long pipe like that. Just to quickly wrap up the graphite, the excess sour water is of course dumped. This is the one storage that I didn't put all the way over here on the sort of the storefront. This is temporary. The moment we can, we're going to start supplying that via CO2. So this will all be deleted for sure. So I don't mind it being a little bit temporary to occasionally have to run a little bit of sour water manually. Similarly, we're not going to set up a whole sour water stripper about it. We have a little bit of excess throughput over here. We'll make a truck probably have to come all the way around the long way here to drop it off manually, but that is fine by me. As I mentioned, small volumes, temporary. The molten silicon then comes out, passes through silicon reactor. I did actually end up making enough to take advantage of the full throughput. It's all going to back up pretty quickly, but I just thought, you know what the heck? We're here. Let's just set it up all the way. It doesn't take so much more to have a second one of these out. It turns that into silicon poly, which comes out to this assembly. Nope. Not right. These assemblies, there we go, for the electronics 2, and that wraps up that segment of the production chain. One last thing to point out, the hydrogen is brought in over here and run via pipe out there. The plastic, as we already mentioned, exact same strategy, literally copy-pasted this from the medical supply module, and we're going to preferentially run naphtha when we have it and backfill with ethanol when we need it. We already mentioned the chlorine is here for the polymerization plant as well. He runs his exhaust out this way. The arc furnace, what little exhaust it makes, also runs out this way. And just to be safe, we are upgrading the throughput on the sort of the main exhaust line on its way out to the exhaust scrubber. Then the assembly making the PCB receives also just a continuation of this copper line. Figures it's small volume, you might as well just wrap around. It of course also catches the plastic from the polymerization plant and this bit of glass that we're bringing in via truck manually out this way. All of that, plus some electronics coming out via a deprioritized balancer over here. It's very important that we maintain electronics 1 supply to the rest of the base. We do not want to be doing any of this at the expense of electronics 1. This is really important. We need this for maintenance, for all of our construction parts 2 and above. We need this for the occasional vehicle part or train, depending if we're going in the hydrogen direction, for example. There's a ton of stuff, research, that we need for all of this. Oh, we're going to come back to that in a moment. So we need to make sure that we're only doing this with overflow electronics. The good news is that we seem to have plenty of downtime here for being all jammed up on electronics 1. So this shouldn't be a problem, but this balancer makes sure it's never a problem. And it runs out and around like so. Those are our inputs. Then we send out our outputs here. Electronics 2, there we go. So let's unpause all of this production, see if it works. Assuming that it does and no further changes, at the end of the episode I will take a little snapshot here as well so that you can, for your own reference, see it. I don't know. I mean, I guess you should be able to just place it down over top if you've maintained this exact shape and you want to add this on simply. But I would imagine it's mostly just as a reference. So here we go. Let's let our trucks get after it and go figure out what the heck is going on with the iron scrap. Yeah, in case you're curious, the iron scrap was just a delivery issue. We are still able to do this manually. It's going to give me these annoying little alerts, but it's functional. I think in the longer run, I'd like to, get this with a proper prioritized balancer input, but while we're doing this weird, janky double belt thing for throughput, I'm just gonna live with it. Unrelated, we have completed construction out here. We are just waiting on hydrogen for the reactor fuel. I have to say we are actually hurting a little bit on hydrogen. We aren't making quite so much from the overflow of our ammonia, and this is not kicking in as fast as I would like, but there's still plenty here. So I think what we're going to need to do is go ahead and build these after all, because this is filling up a little bit faster than I expected. Why not? We've got them here. We might as well just go ahead and do it. So I'm even going to quick build it and see if we can't speed things up a little bit. The 3 of these should make 24, which is exactly still enough for this single hydrogen reformer. The other thing we could do, if we wanted, would be to allow the delivery of fuel gas over here explicitly. Let's see if we can avoid that. I would prefer if we didn't have to run stuff across the base like that. Built and boosted. While that's going, a couple quick terraforming updates. So we have completed this journey up here so that we have better access to unrock-capped iron ore as necessary. This makes me feel a lot more comfortable about our eventual transition off of the good stuff here. The other thing that we are building towards, I think I mentioned it in the notes but never said it out loud, we want to get gold going in relatively short order, and this is our best deposit, but we can't quite reach it directly, so this is a step towards that as well, just from a terraforming perspective. Over here, we've also just finally broken through, which is great news. So I've redirected them to get towards some more dirt, sort of flatten this area, right? This whole space is going to be a factory floor. It can't be hills. So that has this part of our bridge shuttle going pretty wild, which is nice. And then, of course, we are, I think, taking it all the way over here. Yep. And we'll keep dumping in this area. Finish off this waterfront as well. Maybe the other part to call out, yep, we are starting to chip away on trees over here so that this can turn into a train station. And I've given a little local storage here to make that a little bit faster. And in fact, yeah, we've got our hydrogen over here. Very good. So we are starting, I believe, that means to, yep, spin out our first electronics 2. That's fantastic. So that means that we can go over here and actually grab construction 4, which I'm gonna do. We'll come back to gold. We don't need gold in high quantities until we get to electronics 3 for microchips, but you can use it for luxury goods to supply to our settlement. It's just pure unity. So it's nice to have, and if we can set it up before, we certainly will, but I'd rather focus on getting construction 4, because we will have some of these, and we have a bunch that we've gotten out on the world map as well, so we can actually put them to use in a targeted way early on. All right, well, very good. So yeah, that's electronics 2. Hopefully that is a helpful prime. It is nowhere near the scale that we're going to build out there, because we are going to need, just as a reminder, an absolute ton of electronics 2. As we said before, I think it's the thing you staple on to construction parts 3 to make them construction parts 4. You need one of these for every single construction parts 4 you use, and you will use a lot. The same is true, not at the same ratio, but same is still directionally true of the move to vehicle parts 3, which is how we use mega vehicles. It doesn't show up in the recipe book, but it's important. You also staple them on to lab equipment 2 to make lab equipment 3, so you're going to use them here as well. Household appliances, they're like household goods, but, they're appliances, I guess. They take electronics too. We probably won't make a ton of office supplies, certainly not in the short term, but they take electronics too. This goes into the space program eventually. There's an entire tier of maintenance too that requires electronics too. It's a big deal. So we're going to make a lot of it. So imagine each of these micro modules that are currently single machines scaled pretty significantly up, right? So you can see by the fact that I'm already talking about building an entire refinery to make naphtha for plastic dedicated to the factory. That is the kind of scale that I'm thinking. So should be fun. I'm excited for it. Before we wrap up for the day though, I did say we wanted to get some more mining outpost progress made, so let's dive into the work remaining there. All right, so first things first, in order to prepare this area to eventually be a train station, we are going to have to do a little bit of cleanup here as well. So I'm going to spin up a terraforming crew using some of the excavators we just wrapped up elsewhere, actually, to flatten out a lot of this area. So let me do that real quick. All right, that's a good start. Plenty more to do. The issue, I think, is that we want to tap this oil deposit, and in order to do that, we're going to have to run a pipeline up into this area for a train station. This set of hills seems like a bit of a nightmare. I'd like to get this all flattened eventually, but I think in the meanwhile what we'll do is just run the pipe along the beach out this way and then cut up this hill temporarily. So the other thing we can probably do as well is at least start a dumping zone out here that will create a proper incline for us. So let's do that. This will only be rock at this point, which is great because that's going to come out of here. Probably set up a bridge shuttle in the same way, but let's focus on the oil for now. The other thing we'll have to do is continue this line through here and figure out how we're going to branch off to get down to the refinery too. But first things first, let's continue the main line. All right, I got a little carried away and actually just went through and finished off the refinery drop-off station, but walking through it quickly, we continue the bi-directional rail out this way, got some crossings, make sure that we're still able to get even tall vehicle traffic through, and we've rerouted, and I guess, the way we have to, but in a funny little way, the belts and pipes along the way, but everything should still be quite functional. And when we hit this point, we branch off into a spur. This is just for one station drop-off. That's only ever going to have one train at a time, at least at this point. So we are just going to make this a loop, and we will therefore be able to break off and then re-merge in this direction. If we end up bringing oil from the other direction, we'll have to set up some turns in the other way, but it's only coming from there for now. So we will naturally need to set up the station on this side along with all the oil pumps and to run that pipeline out there. We might as well get started in the meanwhile. So I'm gonna unpause these productions and make sure to very explicitly Unity build some of these ramps and such that I have broken our traffic with. And one last point to make. So we do meet up here. I had thought we would use this balancer, but it turns out it's actually here. So I'm gonna clear this out, replace it. We use this balancer to prioritize train supplied oil to preserve and or minimize the use of our world map supply, given that on a per unit basis, it is more expensive in terms of Unity and shipping costs and workers, etc. So we'll try to maximize our use of what is already on the map. So I'm gonna go through and tidy some of this up, and I'll see in a moment when it's time to set up the other side of the track. All right, well, I take back what I said about having to run the pipeline out and around. I think we're gonna cut through the incline here in pretty short order. Turns out if you throw half a dozen excavators at something, they move quickly. And while they've been doing that, I quickly sketched out the loop on this side as well. So longer term, right, we're gonna have a whole series of stations in this area, and they will export iron and coal and maybe limestone, and let's find out. But for now, we're just gonna start with the oil one because it's the simplest and I think, well, easiest one for us to benefit from quickly. So go ahead and get these all set up here, and then I think it is time to build the train. All right, so for the train we're going to build, we're obviously going to take advantage of the Steam Locomotive 2. It's the only Tier 2 train that we've unlocked so far, but it does also unlock all of the Tier 2 wagons, which is great news. So it's better, of course. How much better? Well, it costs twice the maintenance and fuel and makes twice the pollution, but same number of workers and more than twice the power for less than twice the extra length, and much better, max speed on flat and incline, and better acceleration as well as the other difference here. So really solid jump in both overall output and efficiency, right? Because the increased cost is less than the increased gain. So we are definitely going to use these where we are able to, which is really everywhere so far, or going forward rather. So we'll slap down a locomotive tender and we will grab ourselves some tanker wagons. Kind of want to do 4, but yeah, that spills us up over the edge of the train depot length. So before we do that, we are going to need to quickly extend. No problem, that's why we left all this room. Probably gonna need to go ahead and clear out some of this ground floor ore so that we have room to continue expanding, but we'll get there. So let's go ahead and build this, and we will give it a new line, which we will set up in a moment. But let's get this in motion because it's going to take a few parts we have, but it'll take time. While that's going, coming over here and checking in on our progress, very good. Let's go ahead and set up some extractors. All right, I've set up a patch of extractors. These oil pumps, as a reminder, do 20 each, and our current refinery throughput, if I'm not mistaken, is 240. Yeah, 60 times 4. So we need to get ourselves 12. These are sets of 6 here, and we will connect them up and run them up the rest of this pathway, which I've started to build the infrastructure for once the remaining bits of rock are out of the way. Other thing to call out, we completed the research of construction parts 4. I'm tacking something on because we got to keep researching something. I'm grabbing power generation 4. This will be a good way for us to make use of some limited, so far, electronics 2. So we'll do the one-time upgrades. These power generators are a more efficient version of our baseline ones, so for the same inputs we'll get more output. And the same is true on the cooling tower large, where we have like 4 smaller cooling towers. This will handle all of it in one go, and we get back more than 50% by volume. So these are efficiency upgrades that we can do one time without having to consume a bunch of ongoing pieces, where we would, for example, if we wanted to supply household appliances, we'd be continuously consuming electronics too. So I think this is the right one for us to start with. It's free power, so we'll take it. All right, so that's this pathway complete. Let's go ahead and build this all. So we can't Unity build our oil extractors, I guess to keep us from building them magically off in the distance on tiny islands we can't yet reach. So we'll have to let them get built manually. But while they're doing that, we can figure out something else to do with this mining crew. I think we can afford to just throw them out here and keep ripping away at the flattening project. So, all right, deal. Let's do that. We can delete and remove and slap another 6 on here. Yeah, that's gonna speed things up, isn't it? Yeah, so the other thing we're obviously gonna have to do before we actually can use the completed and ready train is, connect it to the actual line that we want to send it on. Whoops. So we'll go ahead and probably just quickly reuse this track and send it back around. But as a quick aside, you can probably imagine a lot of this loop is going to get reworked in the coming episodes as the intersection of 2 pretty sizable train, infrastructure arterials comes together here. We will need to redo and rethink, I think, how many of the parts of this loop actually work. So, enjoy it while it lasts, I suppose. At any rate, I'm going to hop in and take care of this real quick. Yeah, that should work. We are officially starting to create truck bottlenecks where we are able to cross these tracks. That is always the trade-off of running these things through crowded areas, but I think we'll be just fine overall. Look at those guys go. All right, now that everything is built, let's create the new line. So we're gonna call this our oil refinery import line, I suppose. We can grab the crude oil icon even, and we'll call it a black train, I suppose. We need to naturally add some stops. So we'll come out here first and pick up, and then we will come on back over here and drop off. Let's only leave the oil export if we are full. And the other thing to keep in mind is our refueling situation. So we currently do have the steam refueling module at this station and hooked up. I just took the same water output that we have over here, ran a little bit over this way, brought in a little bit of coal. We have the station module out here. I didn't bother hooking it up. If we don't have to refuel on this end, we're not going to, because it's pulling a bunch of coal out there. Water is no problem. There's actually a reservoir right here, but if we can avoid it on the coal front, I'm going to, at least for now. I have a feeling we're gonna end up running, using this coal, a whole bunch of refueling for various trains eventually. Let's see. The cool thing about Tier 2 steam trains is that they also have tier 2 tenders, so they should also have larger range, but they have larger fuel consumption. Let's see how it evens out. I'm cautiously optimistic. But I think, unless we goofed it, there we go. We should be able to watch this fella take a trip. He's huge. Look at the size of that lad. He is an absolute unit for sure. And yeah, that's his tender. That's all the extra fuel he has, so hopefully that's enough for this whole loop. I even feel like he could probably have a few more cars if we wanted. But let's just see how it goes. Well, and just like that. Just about 2,000 oil. Pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, that's high throughput, and pretty quick, I have to say. So that's a pretty solid development for us, I think. I'm pretty pleased with that. This storage, yeah, just got absolutely crushed when he came out here. So the fuel also seems fine. It looks like this is an unnecessary module for now, at least. That's fantastic news. And we should be able to, in pretty short order, I think, cut back at the pace that we are running our oil rigs. So I think, in fact, let's preemptively cut production. That's a full storage already. I think we can probably do even more than this. You know, theoretically, we can send both of these to 0, but let's let them fill up first. I guess if this one's at a full storage, send them to 0 anyway. Look at that. A bunch of workers. More Unity back. Good stuff. Very good stuff. All right, well, yeah, looking at the runtime, should probably go ahead and call it an episode for today. Pretty solid one, though. We got through just about everything that's on here, and then some. I think sort of starting with our Electronics 2 setup, we are definitely set here. We have even, in fact, started to poke into these additional researches, and the small amount that we've already got set up is going to get us ready to make the big amount on the next island. The progress preparing for that has actually accelerated here, I think. We are cruising through now some of this flattening work. Glad that we've broken through there as well. That's a big milestone too. So not bad at all. On the mining outpost side of things, we definitely got through a pretty significant remodeling of this whole corridor here. I think the look of our base really has changed now that this is a spine that our transport runs through. It's pretty cool. You can sort of see the infrastructure evolving. So that's sorted. We've got our first tier 2 train. We've got our first train line from this island, and it's a pretty good one. It's a pretty impactful one. So very pleased with that. As we had laid out a couple other ones that we can do, and I think we will do in the future, but we'll save those for next time. And then we not only got our cargo ships out there in anticipation of getting to our first contract, we got our first contract, and it is helping us, as you can, I think, appreciate over time here, really work on our hydrogen production. I think we could consider, for example, switching this guy over to hydrogen and then just cracking the extra heavy oil or using it for power or what have you. It's making our overall refining economy a bit more productive if we are able to bring in more hydrogen, essentially, for slag, right? And what are we missing? Not much. This coastline is going to fill in here shortly anyway. So feel good about that. Looking forward to getting the rock one and maybe even eventually the dirt one set up. So I think that's going to be helpful for us. So we got all that sorted. We've, as we mentioned, made some pretty good terraforming progress here and there. We are, I think, ready to tackle gold here at some point soon. in addition to some of those, low-hanging fruit in the early Electronics 2 era of techs in the next episode or so. However, before the next episode happens, between now and then, we are going to do the stream that I mentioned in the last episode. We're going to do that Friday at 1 p.m., 2 days from now. If you are around at 1 Eastern and you feel like hopping on, please do. It'd be great to have you on. If not, no worries. Come see it afterwards, or I'll do a quick recap in the next edited video. But we are, as I mentioned last time, just going to do some site prep stuff and hang out, celebrate a little bit of the channel's recent progress. It's been very fun. It's been fun to share it with y'all, and also answer some questions. Anything that is on your mind, where the channel's going to go, all that kind of stuff. That is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to that. So keep an eye out for it, and please do join if you can. Until then, though, either the stream on Friday or the next episode, no matter where I catch you next, have a great rest of your day, and bye-bye.